Glanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So let me say up front that I'll be splitting my time with my colleague, the Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland. It's always an honour to rise in this House and speak on behalf of the people of Flamborough-Glanbrook, and today to speak on the ways in which the 2022 federal budget is failing Canadians as we consider Bill C-19 of the Budget Implementation Act. So, Madam Speaker, the number one issue facing Canadians is the cost of living. And we've heard that time and time again. And as summer approaches, perhaps the first summer, without some sort of COVID restrictions that we've seen in the past couple of years, Canadians are looking forward and wanting to enjoy the aspects of life that are so great about Canadian summers. So whether that's the warm weather, the longer days, our beautiful parks, beaches, and trails, enjoying a bike ride with a family, or watching the Blue Jays play at the Rogers Centre. But instead, Madam Speaker, they're stressing out about paying their bills. They're worried that if they really can't afford that summer road trip, with gas prices over $2 per litre across the country. And that picnic in the park, the groceries are going to be at least 9.7% more, probably higher. The price of food, the price of gas, the price of home heating, the cost of life. That is what I hear about every single day from constituents in Flamborough-Glanbrook. And so, Madam Speaker, this is especially true for people in rural parts of my riding. They need to drive to work, to school, to engage in social activities, to go to medical appointments, and the price at the pumps is leaving them feeling that they're going in reverse, which is why a budget with no plan to address the cost of living is really no plan at all. So, Madam Speaker, the federal government took in $39 billion more in additional revenue because inflation swelled their coffers. But they didn't return any of that to Canadians struggling to get by. Instead, they piled on an additional $50 billion in inflationary spending. Madam Speaker, what's worse is that the NDP Liberal coalition has rejected any reasonable common sense suggestions that we've made to bring relief to Canadians. In March, they rejected our motion to pause the GST at the pumps, especially on the eve of a carbon tax increase and excise tax increases that were going to take effect on April 1st, that were certainly going to do harm to families, to seniors, to small businesses, and in fact, everyone. And just yesterday, our motion to provide relief to Canadians in several practical ways was also rejected by the Liberals and NDP. Madam Speaker, we proposed two things that would have brought an immediate relief at the pumps: a temporary suspension of the GST on gas and diesel, and to suspend the carbon tax. And this would be something that would actually be tangible in combating high gas prices, which is what Canadians want and what people in Flamborough-Glanbrook are asking me about every day. They can't make ends meet, and that's not surprising when the price of gas is, as we said, over $2 a litre, and the price of food is 10% or more up. It's the highest rate of food inflation we've seen since 1981. And so obviously making ends meet is getting harder and harder. So, Madam Speaker, I want to share a few stories of conversations that I've had with constituents in the past couple of months, because I think these are the very real and concerning cost of living issues that Canadians are facing. Sal is a constituent in the Stony Creek Mountain community in my riding, and he tells me his single income family is having a lot of trouble, and these are his words. They're having financial struggles as the cost of living is exceedingly high. Heinz is a senior living on a fixed income in West Flamborough, and he shares with me his home heating bill every single month, and he's always shocked and dismayed and questioning the amount of tax, including carbon tax, on that bill. And as a senior on a fixed income, that's a monthly challenge to his budget. And then there's Garrett, who lives in Mount Hope in my riding, and he commutes to work, and he couldn't believe the increase in the carbon tax on April 1st at a time when gas prices were already going up. And he notes that this cost of fuel is really a challenge for him and his household as they commute to work every day. So, Madam Speaker, these are just a few examples of the very real concerns from the lives of ordinary Canadians. And that's why, Madam Speaker, it's puzzling to me that the Liberals did not use the windfall in revenue that the government received from rising inflation to address the cost of living crisis that Canadians are facing, maybe using some of the pragmatic suggestions that we've proposed. Instead, Madam Speaker, the 2022 federal budget includes another $50 billion, as I've said, in uncontrolled spending. And if we add that up, that can only be paid by higher taxes in future years. The size of the federal government, we know, has grown 25% since pre-pandemic. But yet you can't get a passport in a timely fashion. And as the member for Calgary Forest Lawn has articulated earlier this evening, you can't get other government services or IRCC either. So that really begs the question. Madam Speaker, this government's lack of concern about the cost of living contrasts with that of our neighbors to the south, where U.S. President Joe Biden and Treasury Secretary Yellen have acknowledged that inflation is a real problem, and they're acting. And here, we have no plan. Madam Speaker, I'd also want to talk about another issue that I'm hearing from my constituents in Flamborough-Glanbrook, and I've had a number of conversations in the last few months, and that's the tariffs on fertilizer. Madam Speaker, it's a frustration for farmers in my riding who've done all the right things. They ordered their fertilizer over the fall or winter. You know, they work hard as stewards of the land, and yet they're slapped with a punitive tariff on fertilizers just at the time when they're looking to plant their crops for this year's season. In fact, I met with family farmers who run a grain operation in Glanbrook a month ago, and they took the time from a very busy planting season to discuss this issue, and they had penciled it all out, handwritten on pages, and they showed me their calculations, and it was astonishing. Their fertilizer costs grew from $900 per ton in 2018 to over $2,300 this year. And on top of that, they showed me their gas prices and their diesel prices and their propane, and it's all up. And so the economics of their operation are increasingly out of whack. Madam Speaker, these are the people who produce our food, and they assure the food security of our nation as well as our world. And so yes, I understand and support the need to combat Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, but we're doing that in a number of ways. But we can't do that on the backs of our farmers. And so Canada is the only G7 country to apply a tariff directly on imported fertilizer from Russia. And it's a large one at that, at 35%. And Conservatives have called on the government to exempt farmers and suppliers who ordered fertilizer before or on March 2nd. However, the Minister of Agriculture told the Agricultural Committee that the government would do neither exempt these orders nor offer compensation to farmers to offset the costs of these tariffs. And yesterday, the Liberals and NDP voted down our motion on affordability that included a provision to eliminate the fertilizer tariffs. So, Madam Speaker, I know that my time is winding down, so I want to conclude with a conversation I had a few Fridays ago with Darlene. And Darlene is a senior living in the Upper Stony Creek community within my riding. And she was incredibly frustrated and incredibly concerned because she could no longer make ends meet on her fixed income, the cost of groceries. In fact, other costs that were unforeseen included some medications that she needed to take that were certainly exacerbating the problem. But even just running her household. And she unfortunately had to take the decision to sell her house and move in with her daughter. So how sad is it that a senior who worked all her life and contributed to this country and lived in a modest home in a modest neighborhood couldn't make ends meet? And so she questioned what the government was doing to help her and all of the Canadians that were dealing with this affordability crisis. And so, Madam Speaker, that's the question that Darlene has for this government. Do they understand, do they know that cost of living is the #1 issue facing her and Canadians? And if so, why is fixing it not the #1 priority in the budget and for this government? Thank you.